نطلع على ألمانيا مشان نخلص من عذابنا نحن، نخلص من ألمنا، نخلص من الظلم، من الذل اللي كنا عايشينه. حاج بقى بكفي ألم.
It is imperative that in 2017, Congress and the new president work on bringing more Syrian refugees into the United States. Most people are aware of there being a Syrian refugee crisis in the world, but what is this crisis?
The Syrian refugee crisis has been called the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The Syrian civil war has had a real impact on the population of Syria. There's been atrocities committed against civilian populations, so it's not safe to be in a conflict zone. So the only option that people have had is to leave.
The United States has been perceived as the land of opportunity, the land where everyone is welcome. The Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Now, in this urgent hour of need, many politicians have chosen to go back on this duty.
At least 29 governors in the U.S. now saying refugees are not welcome.
What does Islamophobia mean?
Islamophobia has many different definitions, but one of the most popular ones is some kind of exaggerated, irrational fear of Muslims. It is exaggerated because of stereotypes in the media or because of misinformation or disinformation about Islam and Muslims.
There's legislation that I've introduced that would block Syrian refugees.
They're not necessarily a religion of peace.
That is Islamophobia, and the rhetoric that politicians have been using, including the President-elect of the United States, has an extreme part in the perception among Americans of Muslims and refugees. In 2014, there were 154 reported acts of violence and vandalism against Muslims, and in 2015, there were 257 reported acts, a 67% increase, according to the FBI. Now, in 2016, people are taking to social media to report their experiences. When Americans are afraid of their Muslim American counterparts already in the country, it makes sense why they would be afraid of accepting refugees who may be Muslim from other places. Therefore, one thing that Congress and the new president can do to move towards accepting more refugees is to reduce Islamophobia in the United States. First, stop using anti-Muslim rhetoric and stop assigning the label of terrorist to all Muslims.
We're not going to strengthen our leadership around the world by allowing politicians to insult Muslims or pit groups of Americans against each other.
Second, fund more programs for young people to be involved in alternative media to promote community and anti-Islamophobia sentiment, as well as fund inter-community programs to promote understanding.
Because when we talk about the media, we have two different types of media. And alternative media means the new media that people like me and you can have some control over. The role of citizen journalism, the role of young people trying to own the message and to give voice to the voiceless and to present an alternative message.
So that we have more people-to-people, more ethnic communities doing collaborative work. Those types of programs work.
Third, pass laws to prohibit discriminatory policing.
For too long, we've allowed what we call racial profiling. It creates neighborhoods against neighborhoods and makes us less safe.
Once we diminish the amount of Islamophobia in this country, Muslim Americans will be safer and Americans will be more inclined to accept Syrian refugees into the country. Why should we allow Syrian refugees into the country? Many people have the concern that accepting refugees will add competition to the job market and bring huge economic distress to the country. While it is true that it costs up front to resettle refugees and get them on their feet, studies have shown that in the long term, refugees bring economic productivity to the country. Part of this is because refugees are more likely than other groups to start businesses, which create new jobs and stimulate the economy. Another concern people have is security. As you can see, extensive background checks are made to ensure that the refugees coming in have a legitimate reason and that they have no affiliation with terrorist groups. Finally, these points shouldn't be at the forefront of the argument to bring in Syrian refugees. In fact, there shouldn't need to be a documentary to help convince Americans to allow refugees into the country.
1939, the transatlantic liner the St. Louis sailed from Germany with almost 1,000 souls aboard, all Jews seeking to flee the murderous wrath of Adolf Hitler. But it was denied entry into the United States. The refugees were reported to be communists and anarchists, and we were scared of them.
And, a lot of people from those instances said never again. And here we have a very real refugee crisis.
The United States, for a long time, has been a place where those who are being persecuted know that they can come and seek refuge and freedom. The Statue of Liberty, it's what this country is about.
We can't pull up the ladder and lock all the windows and doors. We have to continue to be a haven of refuge for people from around the world who are seeking a better life.
I think all public officials have a duty to not allow ignorance and hatred and bigotry to fester in the country.
So Congress and soon-to-be President Donald Trump, before you say we shouldn't admit any Syrian refugees, think about where your ancestors came from and what the United States of America is supposed to stand for.
Standing on this idea of multiple immigrants coming from all over the world, making the country big and strong and great as it was. So how come if you're gonna kick the Muslims, for instance, out of the United States? That's unreasonable because if you kick the Muslims for them because they are Muslims, and you kick the Latinos because they are Latinos or whatever, and if you kick the Jews because they are Jews, so what's left?